the real star of the show today. Hi. I know it's been a very long time since I've last made a video. I'm gonna try to be a little bit better about making videos and stuff. For the most part, I just kind of stopped having ideas on videos and it just like fell out of my routine. But yeah. So today, we're gonna be talking about books. And if you know me, that might be a little bit of a shock because I've never been much of a reader until recently. I started reading a lot, like at the end of last year, and I have compiled a little bit of a list of books that I think have really made me who I am, that have impacted my personal growth, that have made me the person I am today. That being said, this list of books is not going to include anything that I have read as a child or as like an early teenager. I think, so this list actually is of books that I've read from when I was in my late teens until now. Some of them are a little bit more recent. But yeah, so let's get into it. I have a whole list, so hopefully this won't take long. Admire my son in the background. I love you. I love you. So this might be a little bit long. I am gonna try to not ramble too much, but grab yourself some tea or water or snack or whatever, and let's hang out and talk about books. So I'm not gonna go through this list like in a chronological order or any order of any kind. So bear with me. There's a mix of fiction and poetry, mostly fiction, I think. Yeah. And then I'm gonna tell you about what I'm reading currently. The first book I want to talk about is Valley of the Dolls. I actually watched the film first, way back when it was on Netflix when I was like still in high school. I watched the film because of Marina, at the time, Marina and the Diamonds. And I didn't actually end up picking up the book until I was about 20. I think I purchased this at Barnes & Noble, probably. Like, I love this. This like detail, amazing. We love Sharon Tate. May she rest in peace. Anyway, so I bought the book and didn't actually read it for probably like a few months. Back when I was in a book club, this was my choice and I didn't even read it in time for the book club. I actually really enjoyed this. It's a thicker book and I don't remember taking too long to read it. I need to read it again. If I'm being honest, I need to read it again. Something that really surprised me about reading the book after watching the film is the time frame in which this book takes place. So it starts like in the 40s. Let me see. First page, September 1945. And ends, I want to say in the 60s. Yeah, in the 60s, mid-60s. So this book spans like 20 years. It is heartbreaking. It is enchanting. In my opinion, I think this is a very well-written book. I think that if you've seen the film, if you enjoyed the film, you should read the book. Not to be like that guy. I feel like the movie is done really, really well and really encapsulates a lot of the like aesthetics that the book describes. Like I feel like the movie adaptation does a really good job, but obviously a lot of stuff is left out. Like I said, this spans 20 years. The story spans 20 years. So there's a lot that happens. It does shift perspectives between the three, main girls, starting off with Anne. And, it talks so much more in depth about Neely's fame and Jennifer's downfall and like all that kind of stuff. I think I would rate this probably a 7.5 out of 10. I definitely need to read it again. I haven't read it since I was 20, so that was like ages ago. When did you leave the bed? Oh. This video is about my cat. He's about my child. Hi. Okay, let's move on. So this next one is poetry, and I actually kind of stumbled upon this by accident. So he's playing with my chair. I found this, Barnes & Noble is like where I apparently buy all my books. In like 2014, I was at a Barnes & Noble by myself, and was just kind of like looking through all their stuff, and I happened to be in the poetry section, and I just saw this spine that says, "I wrote this for you." It really stuck out to me. It just grabbed my attention right away. I was like, what is this? And then the cover just says, "I wrote this for you." And on the very first page, the author is "Please find this." So there is an anonymous element to it. I later found out who actually wrote the book. I'm not going to spoil it for you because I feel like leaving the author anonymous adds to the book itself. This is a book of love poems, and not in like sort of like the cheesy love poetry sort of way, but every page has a little poem and a photograph, and it's very beautiful. I actually went through and dog-eared all of my favorite pages. I've never dog-eared a book before this, and I haven't done it to a book since. Some people think it's like sacrilegious, and I agree to a degree. This book, like the back, like everything about it is pretty mysterious. It feels like a beautiful love letter to a person that we don't know, by a person we don't know. And it just feels like they just put it out as like an act of devotion almost. There is an element of longing, of yearning, of heartbreak. And this doesn't even feel like superficial love. Like this is the kind of love where it's like you've known someone for a really long time, you know who they are as a person, you're really connected to them, and then they just disappear. And this book is so good. Let me read you one of my favorites. The lipstick on the window. The words "I love you" become nothing but noise. But that's why we kiss, to say with our lips what we couldn't before. It just feels like little snippets, and the photography really adds to it. 8 out of 10. Anyway, I wrote this for you. My son has left me, so. Okay, so this next one is like a collection of short stories. So this book is by Carmen Maria Machado, Her Body and Other Parties. I love this book. So actually, the story of how I obtained this book is kind of interesting. I got this for free. My local library at the time was handing out free books. They had a display of books that you could take. So it's not a library book. So I saw this, and something about the cover alone, I was like, I need this. And I started reading it, and it is amazing. Like I said, it's a collection of short stories by one author, and every short story is beautifully written, intense in their own ways, very captivating. This is a book that I have definitely recommended to other people more than once. Just the way that it's written alone is so intimate, so enchanting. I know I've already used that word. I love repeating words. And if you can get your hands on a copy of this, I highly recommend you do so. What? The first story is actually a story we all know. Well, most of us know. But it was re-adapted by the author. And it's really fun. The whole book is really fun. This is a 9 out of 10. I loved this one. I actually need to reread it. It's going to be my catchphrase. This next one might be a little shocking. Not a lot of people know about this book. It is a book that very few people on this planet seem to know. It is also the book that I have made the most people read. Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille. If you know this book, if you've read this book, if you're horrified that this is on my list, that's fine. I agree with you. I'm horrified too. I have made so many people read this book because I think it's fascinating and I love seeing the reactions of other people reading it for the first time and just seeing what people think about it and also what parts stick out most to certain people. This is definitely like my case study book. Like, if you can read this all the way through, if you can tell me what you liked and didn't like, or how it made you feel, then I want to know. This is definitely a book that I think that should only be for adults. So how I found out about this book is actually from an Of Montreal song, The Past is a Grotesque Animal. He name drops the title and the author in a line of the song. And first time I heard that song, I was 16. I didn't look it up until I was probably about 17. Saw that it was an actual book, had no idea what it was about, didn't know the genre, didn't know anything about it, just that it existed, and I needed to get my hands on it. This is actually my second copy. My first copy that I ever picked up, I was 17, and I found it in I want to say I found it in a bookstore in Seattle. Could be wrong about that, but I think I did. So I actually saw it out in the wild. It was like a mom and pop bookstore, and I read it in high school. Don't recommend that. Actually, I'm gonna say right now, only adults read this book, probably 21 plus. It is erotica. It is also horror. I would say that it's like horror erotica. There are elements of this book that are extremely disturbing. I have actually heard some people talk about how they think this book is very disingenuous and was written just for shock value. I don't personally think that. So I've actually read this book 3 times. I read through it every few years. I read it when I was 17, I read it again when I was 20, and then again when I was 24. So I'm kind of due to read it again. So this book was published originally in French in 1928. So it does very much give the like early 19th century literature vibes. It starts off really strong and escalates from there. It is extremely erotic. It is very descriptive. It is also very horrific. It is, like I said, it's a horror in my opinion. There are elements that are extremely uncomfortable, extremely disturbing. I think it's fascinating, which is why I've read it so many times. This is a book that I think if you read it once and you're not disturbed by it and you can read it again, I do recommend it. Not because the first time you miss things, but I feel like the more you read it, the more you decode. There's a lot of elements of this that I feel like are almost metaphors for other things. It's hard to explain. I don't think that this was written for shock value. I genuinely think Georges Bataille wrote this almost like writing himself as a teenage boy in this story. What are you doing? I woke him up and now he's a terror. Every time I read through this, I get the impression that he's writing himself into this story as a young lad. The main character is 16. Story of the Eye, Georges Bataille. So this, I'll probably give it like an 7.7 out of 10. There are some books on my list that I don't actually have physical copies of, so I'm just gonna put a photo of the cover. I am an avid supporter of my local library. always have been. So these are books that I have yet to actually obtain, like my own copies of, but they're on my list. I have this thing about ordering books online, so I typically, if I see a book, stop it. He's probably about 4 months old, so he's a nightmare. Stop it! You bored? Yeah, love you. So, what was I saying? What? Stop! Anyway, following are books that I have yet to actually obtain physical copies of. I will typically buy books that I want if I see them in person. So I frequent bookstores, and sometimes I'm like hunting for these books and sometimes they're not there, so I have a list. Anyway, first one I want to talk about is Blood Red by Gabriela Ponce. Ponce? Correct me in the comments. I didn't look up how to say this beforehand. I adore this book. It is so captivating. It is a story of a woman in her like 40s or something. The way in which it's written is very intriguing to me. So it is written as more of a stream of consciousness than a standard narrative, which makes the story just so dreamy. The story itself is very straightforward, but the way in which she describes places, people, experiences, her fears, everything is very surrealistic, which makes the story very dreamy, very dreamlike. It's a book that I need to get my hands on, a physical copy, and I need to be buried with it when I die. I adore the way that it's written. It's very surrealistic, it's very poetic. The chapters are really short, so if you're like me and you've got a very short attention span, it's very easy to read. I found myself absolutely devouring this book. I like literally just couldn't put down. I thought it was so fascinating, and the story itself is very emotional. It's very fantastical almost. The experiences in which this woman goes through is very interesting, but also like the experiences themselves are very real, you know, very real life, but seem very dreamy because of the way the book is written. It's very, very fascinating, and I absolutely adore this book. 1 million out of 10. Oh. So moving on to the next one, Slewfoot by Brom. So I actually read this at the tail end of 2021. My local library had got a copy in, and so it was on their like new bookshelf. And I saw the cover, I saw the title, I saw the little subtitle thing, and I just picked it right up. I was like, this is mine. I don't even know what it's about. I didn't read the back, I didn't read the inside thing. I was just like, it's mine. I need to read it. Brom is a very talented writer. Slewfoot is so amazing. So what's fascinating about the story, in which I feel like really adds to it, is that Brom is also a painter. So the cover of the book is his painting, one of his paintings of the main character. So we actually get to see what she looks like, which is amazing. People who are multi-talented, multifaceted like that, they just add so much more to their art by bringing it all together. Not to be biased. There are also pages in the middle of the book that are other paintings of other characters. So we get to see what these characters look like, which I adore. I am fascinated by. I think it's a brilliant idea, and his artwork is incredible. So Slewfoot is set in Puritan, Connecticut, and I love Puritan New England witch trial, witchy witch stories. Slewfoot is like top tier for me. Recently have started seeing people on like TikTok talk about this book, and I'm really glad that it is getting the recognition that it very much deserves. It's just now hitting the bookstores. I saw it at Barnes & Noble the other day. I want the hardcover copy, and they have the paper cover, and I'm just like the fact that I'm being picky about it is kind of annoying, but I really want like the hardcover. Like I want to grip it, you know, because that's a book I would probably just destroy. The story itself I would kind of categorize as like a fantasy / mystery, obviously like historical fiction. It follows the story of a girl named Agatha who is this outcast in her own little like Puritan village, and all of the trials and tribulations which she goes through. It shifts perspectives between her and a mystical creature, and they end up crossing paths, and it is beautiful. It is very, like, I definitely inhaled this book. I love the way that it's written. It's very palatable for someone like me who, like, if the words are too much, if the writing's too fluffy, I lose interest. The story is very easy to follow, but it's also so magical. It's so magical. It has spirits, it has witchery, it has elements of horror and mystery and fantasy, and I'm not much of a fantasy person. The fantasy that I love has to be like pretty subtle. So there's not like huge fantasy names and places. It's just very localized to this town. 11 out of 10. Slewfoot, 11 out of 10. This next one I think had the greatest impact on the way that I think about life and death. It is If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura. This book was originally written in Japanese and translated into English, and it is so amazing. It's a very thin book. It's only a few chapters long. It's captivating. It is enthralling. It is horrifically sad. There are elements that are very comedic. The whole concept of the book is very refreshing because I feel like it's very new. Or at least it's done in a new way. The main character is basically fighting for more time on Earth, and it makes you really think about what makes life enjoyable, what makes life worth living, the sacrifices that one would need to make. Is it selfish to make a sacrifice that the whole world must endure just so that you have more time on Earth? You know, this book was very, I had to sit after I finished it. I had to just sit and stare at the wall. It's a book that I definitely just need to have a copy of, and I definitely need to read once every few years. You see him? It's a book that I think a lot of people should read. It puts a lot of stuff about life and death into perspective, and it probably had like the greatest impact in that way on me as a person. I read this at the very beginning of this year, so it's been an interesting time. It's like an existential crisis wrapped up in a nice little story. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Next on my list, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I know. All the girlies love this book. I read this late. I read this late last year. That's my song. Okay. The Bell Jar. Would you stop? That's it. I'm kicking you out. Kicking you out. Ugh. No more distractions. The Bell Jar. So I know that I'm a little late to the game. I read it fairly recently. All the girlies love it. It is such a very real story about mental health. It was too relatable. It was way too relatable. The way in which she describes not really wanting to have a purpose, not knowing if she should have a purpose, not knowing what to do with her life, sort of spiraling in this existentialism is extremely relatable. I think we've all been there, but you know, I am definitely a victim of this. The whole metaphor of the fig tree and the whole metaphor of the bell jar, it just sits so heavy on my heart. I'm surprised I didn't read it sooner, but I also feel like when I read it was the perfect time for me to read it, because I guess I just love being in an existential crisis. Sylvia Plath, incredible. I need to read Ariel so bad, but I love the way that it's written. I know I've said that a million times. I love the story. I love everything that the main character just experiences and the way that she describes things, and her inevitable decline mentally is so real. It's insane. Bell jar, 8 out of 10. Okay, so the following are honorable mentions. These are books that I've thoroughly enjoyed, that have had an impact on me. They're not on the official list. They're books that I want to give an honorable mention to. So the first one, Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Gillian Flynn is an amazing writer. I loved Gone Girl, but Sharp Objects was just so much more. I read Sharp Objects 6 years ago, I think when I was like 21, and that was a book that I devoured. That specific story, the amount of mystery, oh, it drove me insane. I loved it so much. That was definitely a book where it made me realize the kind of mystery that I like, and the reason why I love mystery. I've always loved mystery as a genre, and it's really kind of weird for me to say that. I don't know why. I have always thoroughly enjoyed mystery because it's very easy for me to sit in this observer position and just consume the art and let the story unfold and let everything be revealed. I have never been the kind of person to try to figure out who done it before it's revealed, and I've known so many people who are like that, and I don't understand why people do that or why they're like that. Anyway, in retrospect, Sharp Objects is a story that I feel like if one were to read it and, you know, try to actively figure out who done it, the answer would be kind of obvious. But the way in which I read it, where I did just kind of sit in this role of the observer, where I just watched it all play out. I just read it without like turning on that part of my brain. I just let the story consume me as I consumed it. It was just so much more satisfying that way. Sharp Objects is good. Sharp Objects is really good. I have not seen the miniseries. Do I want to? Yes. I just haven't gotten around to it. I've heard it's really good. I've heard it's amazing, but alas, I have not watched it yet. Sharp Objects, 7 out of 10. Okay. I feel like this is mandatory. As a Lana stan, I feel like if I don't mention this at all in any video about books, that it's illegal. Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass. I adored this. I was the kind of girly that was obsessed with the ride monologue, so I read this in the tone in which she reads that. I have not listened to the audiobook version. I kind of want to buy the vinyl and then listen to it that way instead of like online, if it's available online, which I think it is. So I have the hardcover version. I love the design of this book. So I just flipped to this page, the like editing, and then the like, you know, final draft version of the poem on this side. This is like the first draft. The photographs. There's this one where there's like the smudging of the words, like she was crying on it. Oh, I love that visual element. It is so beautiful. I feel like that really adds to the poetry when you read it. The haikus are really cute. I love them. I'm also very curious about these lined pages at the end with these paintings. Like, oh my goodness. Her poetry is beautiful. I would say that, you know, she is a fantastic writer. I want another one. Like, I want more of this. This is probably some of her best written work ever. Mother on the back. Anyway, 9 out of 10. So this next one might be a little controversial as well. I already have controversial titles on this list. This is an honorable mention because I mean, I love this book. I read this so fast. I read this whole book in like 2-3 days. Like, I could not put it down. Every break that there was in the book kind of left on a cliffhanger, and I found myself becoming obsessed with needing to know what was going to happen next. And after I finished the book, I literally was just holding it, staring at the wall going, that is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Sayaka Murata. This is another one that was originally written in Japanese and translated into English. I thought this translation was beautiful. If you love books that are disturbing, that are uncomfortable, that are horrific, this is a good one. This is also a book that I don't have my own copy of, that I really want my own copy of. I haven't really read any of her other books. I tried reading Convenience Store Woman and kind of was lost in the whole like beginning part of that about being a retail worker. That was too much for me. Earthlings was so good. The story is intense and it's dramatic and it's insane and it's obsessive and it's disturbing and it's emotionally distressing, but then at the same time, like, I read the book entirely like in a monotone voice because I feel like that's how it's written. That's how the main character narrates and how she talks, which just makes it feel a little bit more insane. It's a book that I think that you should read if you like that kind of stuff. I had one of my friends read it because she had her own copy and never read it, and I was like, it's time, and she thought it was just way too much. Another one of my friends read it and she actually just liked it a lot, and that was it. So it depends on your tolerance to that sort of stuff. I found it really easy to read. It flows really well, and I really appreciate writing that's like that, so. Okay, so I'm actually gonna wrap this up by showing you what I'm currently reading, because this is gonna make it onto the list of books that make me who I am. And that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I am halfway through this book already. I bought this copy last October, and the only reason why I know that for sure is because this is the receipt for it. I've been using it as a bookmark this whole time. Just now started reading it. I had started reading it when I first bought it and really enjoyed it, but for some reason the really small text on very thin pages was like really intimidating to me at the time, and I hadn't hit a point where I became obsessed with the story. So this book, I know, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. Everyone talks about this book, everyone raves about this book. That's because Donna Tartt is such a talented author. This story is incredible, and the way she writes is like so beautiful. Like, this is a modern classic. Like, this is literature. You know what I mean? Like, this is literature. She's due to write another one, by the way. Goldfinch came out like 10 years ago, and she writes a book every decade, so. I have, what is it, A Little Friend? The Little Friend on my bookshelf right now, and so when I'm done with this, I'll eventually get to that one, but This is so good! Anyway. If you haven't read this, if you've seen other people talk about it, this is your sign to just go read it. It's really good. I actually had to go and buy this copy because my local library did not have a copy of this book. Funny story, it was the beginning of 2022, so a year and a half ago. I put in a request for interlibrary loan. So my library borrowed a copy of The Secret History from another library, and I read the first 3 chapters, loved it, and that's why I ended up buying my own copy. Anyway, so that is it for today's video. If you like content about books, let me know. If you want a version of this about albums, I will do that. Albums that made me who I am today, albums that made me me. I'll do it, but I gotta think about it. I gotta think really hard about it. But that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around. And yeah, so I do hope to post more on my channel. I'm sorry for the big blank wall. There was a tapestry up here, but my child, Hades, that's his name by the way, just tore it down. So, big blank wall. Anyway, I will see you next time, and thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.